Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Denise Martin, and I am the Senior Accountant and Compliance Manager here at Hunger Solutions, New York. Some of you have met me out in the field doing site visits. Some of you will meet me over the next few years. Some of you have emailed with me. We've spoken on the phone. My role here is that I review all budgets, budget amendments. I test backup from vouchers that are submitted on a monthly basis, and I review subcontractors' audited financial statements. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about monthly vouchers, how to submit them on NOEP Online, and the policies and procedures around that. And then we're later on going to talk about budget amendments and the policies and procedures around that, submitting them on NOEP Online. You can ask questions today. There are two ways. There is a box in the middle of the right of your screen where you can type a question and press send. We're going to pause every once in a while to see if there's any questions, and we'll read it to everybody on the call. And then we'll pause every once in a while, to see after each section if we have any questions. And like I said, we'll read it to everyone. If you don't want to do it that way, you can ask us later privately. So if you find that you come up with a question during the webinar and you want to jot that down, or you think of something later on after the webinar, you can certainly email or call me, or you can call your fiscal representative or email them for clarity on anything we've talked about today. So we're going to start today with vouchering and how to voucher on NOEP Online and some of the policies and procedures. We're going to go over some general vouchering rules before we get into NOEP Online. As a reminder, your contract runs from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. So any expenses on your monthly vouchers must be incurred between this period. You cannot expense anything prior to July 1st of 2018, and no funds will be carried forward past June 30th, 2019. So if there's anything that you incur past June 30th, you must leave that for the next contract year. Anything that you don't spend by June 30th is forfeited, and anything that you are expensing on your June voucher, you must have all the info on that voucher entered into that voucher. So any check information, any ACH information, invoice dates, etc., all has to be entered in full by the time that June voucher is due. So by that July deadline, we want to see that all checks have been cut, ACHs have been issued, etc. We have a new policy now about vouchers with retroactive charges. We will approve these on a case-by-case basis up to 3 months back, but under no circumstances will we now allow subcontractors to voucher past 3 months back, unless you can prove that that's the way you're billed. So for example, if you're billed annually for a charge and you can show us an invoice proving that, we will allow that scenario. If you have an expense from December that you just feel like vouchering in April, that will be denied. Your NOEP coordinator, as a reminder, is required to be charged 100% in salary to the NOEP contract. Therefore, anytime there is a retroactive salary charge for a NOEP coordinator that you didn't bill all year, that's prohibited. If your NOEP coordinator is a 40-hour employee, you must charge that 40 hours throughout the year. You cannot charge 35, and then at the end of the year say, well, they really worked 40. You absolutely must bill the NOEP coordinator's salary full-time to the NOEP contract. Expenses associated with the NOEP coordinator, such as their fringe, travel, etc., it's strongly advised that you also bill in full for that. As a general rule, vouchers must be submitted using only whole dollar amounts. You must stick to your agency's budget when you're submitting these vouchers. If you cannot, or if something changes, you must do a budget amendment, which we'll talk about later on. Expenses that are solely child nutrition / SNAP must be charged that way to that funding stream. So for example, if your contract manager is requiring you to do a school breakfast campaign, and you want to place an ad regarding that school breakfast campaign, your outreach charge for that ad must be charged 100% to child nutrition SNAP funds. As a general guideline, when you create narratives for your budget categories, every invoice or billed instance must be a new detail box. We'll go over that when we go over each part of entering the voucher into NOEP Online. We now have a new enhancement which pre-populates each section in each budget line. So all the information that we need to approve your voucher, whether it be invoice number, invoice date, pay date, etc., is all pre-populated. So now once you pull it up, you'll just have to enter it as we need it. We can no longer allow see attached worksheet as a narrative. All the information pertaining to the voucher and that budget category must go right into the voucher. We often ask for backup, and when we do, we pull the information right from your voucher, so we need that copy and paste ability. Also, when we send your vouchers to OTDA, we need to send the voucher full instead of sending numerous backup. Now, you can upload any spreadsheets that you'd like or that would help us with explaining some of your charges, but you can't do that solely. Everything does have to be entered into the boxes. Hunger Solutions New York can request supporting documentation at any time. We're going to go over very briefly in the documentation section some instances when documentation will be asked for and what types of documentation will be asked for. You must submit this documentation when asked by the deadlines, or your contract could be placed in probationary status, or you could delay payment. And most importantly, monthly vouchers are due on the 15th of the month following the last day of the month being vouchered. So for example, your September voucher is due October 15th. It's very important to note that once your voucher is approved by us, it then goes on our voucher to OTDA. If your voucher is not approved and doesn't make it to our voucher to OTDA, that means it will have to go on the next one. So it's very important to stick to the deadlines, because it could significantly delay your payment if you don't. Okay, so we're going to get right into opening a voucher and then into personnel. So log into your NOEP Online screen. And at your main screen, we're going to open a voucher. So from the menu on the left, you're going to select Fiscal, and then you're going to select Vouchers. In Pick Year, you're going to pick 2018, 2019. You'll be brought to your voucher history screen. You'll see each of your months there, but since we're doing a new voucher that we have not worked on yet, you'll click New Voucher. If you were already working on a voucher, you'll see to the right in status, it will say Work in Progress. After you've selected your voucher month, we can begin entering personnel, and then we'll subsequently enter other lines. So we're going to click into personnel here on this voucher to start entering. We're going to click into our NOEP coordinator. This is the screen to enter our NOEP coordinator. Now we're going to start off by telling you in the voucher narrative box, do not enter anything into this box unless your fiscal representative tells you to. So generally, you're going to leave this box blank unless there's a circumstance in which your fiscal representative tells you to enter something there. If not, you're going to click Current. previous reporting month is going to appear in gray above anything you're entering. If you don't have one because you're in July, it will say none. But if you're on subsequent vouchers, August, September, etc., your previous month's information will populate here. Now you're going to enter the following information that we need for the personnel screens. This information obviously has to be in line with the voucher that you provided us, the budget you provided us. So you're going to enter the employee's name, the pay period in which you're billing, the pay date, the total hours worked on NOEP, the employee's hourly rate, the gross pay, and if it's direct deposit or a check number if they're paid by check. You're going to come over to the right, and when entering the total that you're going to be vouchering, you're going to split it between what portion is SNAP and what portion is child nutrition / SNAP. And it would automatically tally the total to the right. Once you're done here, you can press Add. If you scroll down, you'll see that your information has been added. If you happen to have made a mistake when you added here, so for instance, if total hours worked should have said 80, you can go ahead right in the box and change that and press Update. And you'll scroll down and you'll see that it updated that for you. And you can also do that if you send it to us and we send you red flags telling you to change something in there. If you have more information to enter, like more pay periods, you can scroll above and enter that information and add it again. But here, we're going to scroll down. And we just want to point out the character limits. There's 750 characters that you're allowed in these boxes. We just want you to make note of that in case you seem to be running out of characters. You might want to abbreviate. So just be conscious of the character limits. Once you're finished here, you're going to press Close at the bottom. But then when you get to this screen, you're going to press Save. You always want to save so you don't lose any of your work. When you look at current spent for the month, the information you just entered has populated. So we're going to move on to the fringe category now. And we're going to use FICA as the example in this. The screen looks very similar. You would click into Current. And pre-populated is the information we need for any fringe category. So here we're going to enter information that you would enter for FICA. With FICA, there probably will not be an invoice number. Anything that will not have an invoice number, you can either put NA or just leave it blank. For rate used or premium amount, in your budget, you have told us that you either use a rate based on salary. You could put the rate there, that's acceptable. Or if it's a health premium, you could put the health premium there, that's acceptable. If you have more than one health premium, where you have a NOEP coordinator that has family, let's say, and you have another NOEP coordinator that has single insurance, it is acceptable to distinguish that there. You could put initials with the single rate or initials with the family rate, to distinguish which coordinator has which insurance. So basically, rate used or premium amount would be what you've submitted to us in the budget. You would go over to your SNAP box, enter your SNAP and your child nutrition split here, and press Add. If you have more information, you can scroll up and enter it and press Add again. But if this is the only box, you could press Close and press Save. Always remember to press Save. And as you can see in current spent for the month, the FICA has populated. Okay, remember, if you have any questions, to please type the question into the question box, and we can read that out to all of the attendees. So next, we're going to move on to travel. And if you click into your travel, you're going to click Current here. And you're going to click the information that's needed for travel. When you have a vendor or employee, that would be either the employee that you've reimbursed for the travel expenses, or if it's a vendor, it could be the hotel, it could be Metro North for fare or anything like that. That would be the difference. Be as descriptive as possible for the description of charge. So in this scenario, it could be mileage reimbursement. So let us know the rate for the mileage reimbursement and the amount of miles. And the important thing is that you have separate boxes for each charge. So if there's a hotel room, that would be a one box. If there's mileage to be reimbursed to the employee, that would be another box. Please remember that we are not allowed to reimburse for tax. Since you are a nonprofit, you must show your tax-exempt certificate to any hotel. Does not include meals because of how small they are, but you must not pay tax on New York State hotel rooms. Also, if you're giving an advance to an employee as the way of them paying for their travel, instead of a credit card or issuing a check direct to a hotel, let's say, you need to voucher for the actual charges, not the actual advance. So for example, if in October you issue a check to an employee for a $500 advance on travel, and then in November they incur the travel and it's only $450, you're going to be vouchering us for the $450 in travel that took place in November, not on that $500 check that was issued. I think we have a question. Let's click into it. Okay, so the question is, do we have to enter each fringe category by pay period? So what you're doing is you're entering each fringe category by billed instance. So in other words, FICA is billed by payroll. So you would be entering the FICA charges by each payroll. If you have health insurance that is billed monthly, odds are that you'd be entering that charge once. Unless you had two separate vendors, let's say you had Oxford and Cigna, you'd be entering one Oxford bill, one Cigna bill. If you have an annual bill for workers' comp, then you would enter that once and not every month. You would enter that in one voucher. So each fringe category by pay period would really apply to the FICA, and if you have standard unemployment, that would apply, but if you had an unemployment monthly bill from a vendor, then that would be by the month, so that would be entered once. Okay, so we are back to travel where we have entered all the information. And just as an aside, if you are giving an employee a reimbursement for their mileage, you could be paying them by check, or some agencies do direct deposit through payroll. Just indicate that in the last line. If you've given them a check number or direct deposit through payroll, you could put DD there. And then you can press add here. If you have another charge to enter, you can go ahead and enter it in this box, but if you don't and you're done, you can scroll down and press close, save, and the charge we just entered appears in current spent for month. The next line, communication, is very similar to travel. We're not going to enter into here, but we're just going to show you the different lines that we would need entered. This pre-populates also for vendor or employee name in case you have reimbursed an employee for their cell phone, let's say. Description of the charge. So if you have a landline or a cell phone, we want to see that there. Possibly a hotspot, data, whatever it is, please put that there. Invoice number or period covered, so it could be the month of July that you would put there, or sometimes on a cell phone bill, there's a range, you know, July 5th through August 4th, something like that. The date of the invoice, the total invoice amount, and the percent or amount charged to NOEP. So if it's a cell phone bill, you usually have a unit charge if you have one cell phone you're charging, but sometimes if you are using the FTE method to charge a landline, you might want to just put the percentage there that you've told us in your budget. And then we have check date, check total, and either direct deposit or check number. So in this scenario, you are going to separate the boxes out by invoice. So if there's an invoice for a landline, that would be one box. If there's an invoice for a cell phone, that would be another box. And then scroll to the bottom. When you're done entering, again, you would press close. Whatever information you've entered here will save when you press save. And then you can move on. Materials and supplies is basically the same format as well. If you go into material, you will see the information we need. Vendor or employee name in case it's a reimbursement. The description of the charge. The invoice number or period covered. The invoice date, the invoice amount, the percent or amount that you've charged to NOEP, your check date, your check total, and the direct deposit or check number. Again, you want to separate the boxes by invoice. So for instance, if you have one invoice for a laptop, that would be one box. And if you have a different invoice for, you know, regular supplies, such as paper, paper clips, etc., that would be another box. Remember that we are not allowed to pay tax on office supplies, any materials, anything like that. So make sure you do have your tax exempt certificate on file with the vendor, whoever you're using. Another thing to remember is that if you are using an in-house calculation for your printing charges, so let's say that you are charging 5 cents per copy for printing, and that is an in-house calculation based on toner, paper, ink, etc. The toner, paper, and ink you're using for that calculation cannot be billed in these materials and supplies. However, if you're using a vendor like Canon, for instance, and they're giving you a contract rate of 5 cents per copy, then you can put materials and supplies here for paper, ink, etc. And if you have a completely different printer for your NOEP coordinator, obviously that would not figure into the agency's copier, so that can be billed. you have any questions around that, please let us know. Again, you close here and save. We're going to go into printing. And go into current. So in printing, you could have either an agency copier, like I explained, or you could have an outside vendor, like Kinko's, for instance. But the norm is to have the agency copier that you're billing here. So then your vendor would be your agency's name if you're using the in-house copier. The description of the charge, well, we'd like to see the month, and we'd like to see how many copies were charged to NOEP. Invoice number or period covered would be the month. The invoice date is usually the last day of the month. The total invoice amount or cost center allocation, that would be the total amount of printing charges for that month for the agency. In percent or amount charged to NOEP, we'd like to know what your cost per copy is that you put in the budget, and then let us know how much you've charged NOEP for this. Usually with the agency calculation, you don't have a check date, check total, or direct deposit or check number, so you can put NA or leave it blank. We do have some subcontractors who like to give us a journal entry number. That's perfectly fine, but you don't have to. Over when you're putting your amount in, your SNAP and child nutrition, it will total. And just as an aside, if you don't have child nutrition dollars that you're charging to this line, you can either put a 0 in or skip over it and it will default to a 0. And you can press add. If you're done here, you can press close, save it. And in your current spent, you'll see your $10. We're going to click into the outreach category, which is a very, very different category than other lines. It can only be entered from the program side of NOEP Online. This cannot be entered manually like the other lines. So it will require information from your NOEP coordinator or supervisor. They will need to be entering the outreach activity. They'll need to be getting approvals, and they'll need to be getting their placement information in there before you can voucher it. We're going to do an example of how to send outreach to the voucher here. So the first thing you're going to do is go to the left and click on Program, and you're going to click on Outreach Approval Request. Your screen here will show your counties when you do a drop-down menu. And in county, you're going to select the county that you'd like to put the outreach for. If you only have one county, obviously, you can default to that. Make sure the year says 2018, 2019. Leave campaign as all. And then you could press go. As you can see here, there's 2 appearing. And we're going to click on the one for $500. And what you're going to do is scroll to the bottom to the follow-up section for fiscal users to complete. Actual cost of the activity. If you know that the activity costs the $500, you can keep that amount there. You could press ready to voucher yes and submit. However, if you know that it costs less than $500, you can cross that out and put $450, $480, however much the activity costs, and you could press yes and submit to voucher. However, you cannot cross it out and put more than $500. If it did cost more than $500, that outreach approval request would have to be redone. So in this case, we're going to keep it at $500 and press yes and submit to voucher. You're now going to go back to the voucher for July that we were working on. Go into your outreach category. And you're going to see at the top, select outreach approval request. Go into that drop down and you're going to select which one that you want to voucher. We only have one here, but if you had more than one would apply, and you could select it for it to appear below. So you're here, we have our $500 outreach request that we want to voucher. It's there, so we're going to press save. Close. Okay, we seem to be having a technical issue here. Bear with us for a minute. Okay. Sorry about that. So current spent for the month now appears the $500 in outreach that you wanted to voucher. Once you're done here, you want to go to your voucher summary page at the top. You'll click on that. And you want to upload the associated invoice with any outreach that you're putting on this voucher. So you might have one or two that you're putting on, maybe you have 5. You want to press the upload feature here on file attachments. And select the invoice or invoices associated with that outreach approval and press upload. And once you do that, you're going to see that the invoice or invoices will appear there. So we're going to need that in order to approve that expense. Okay, so moving on, we're going to click into the postage category. But this is the same pretty much as the printing. So we're just going to go over it with you that this can be either your agency or an outside vendor like FedEx. It's the same information pretty much. You can enter your agency name here if it's an in-house. In the description of charge, we would like to see if you use a log, a paper log, or a meter here. In the invoice number or period covered, we'd like to see the month. The invoice date would be the last day of the month. The total invoice amount or cost center allocation would be the amount that you've had in total for the organization. But then you'd have the percent or amount charged to NOEP, which would be however many NOEP postage you used. Check date, check total, and direct deposit or check number can all be NA if you're using your agency log or meter. You can press add and then close once you're done entering this category, and then save. So now we're going to go into the overhead category. The overhead category is different because it has 3 templates that you must select from. The templates are overhead personnel, overhead fringe, and overhead other. If you have personnel in overhead, If you have personnel and overhead, then you would want to make sure you select that template. If you have the titles fringe in overhead, you would want to select that template. And anything that doesn't fall into personnel and fringe, you want to select other. So if it's your rent, if it's your audit, if it's payroll processing fees, anything of that nature, that would go into overhead other. So the first thing we're going to do is click into the title here of fiscal associate. We're going to go into current. And as you can see, there's a drop down at the top, and we're going to select overhead personnel, since the fiscal associate is overhead personnel. And in this box, it's asking for a lot of the same information as the regular personnel, with a little bit of a difference. And this is all according to the budget you submitted to us. Okay, so here the information is entered. You'll want to press add on that. If you have another pay period here, you would enter it above, but if this is all you're entering for this month, you can scroll down, press close, press save, and in fiscal associate, the amount you're charging appears in current spent. Just a quick question here that we have, retroactive billing. Would we be allowed to bill for an approved outreach retroactively in the event we missed it in a previous billing? So the 3-month rule would apply here. Make sure that you're looking in your program screens to make sure you're capturing all of your outreach. So please be in your 3-month window with that. There should be coordination between you and the NOEP coordinator or NOEP supervisor about what has been placed. So again, stay in the 3-month window on that, and we would allow it. But if it's going, you know, a November charge not being billed till June, we can't keep up with that. So the answer would be no on that. Okay, now we're looking at fiscal associate fringe. So in this category here, we would go into current, and we would select overhead fringe. And again, it's a lot of the same information as the regular fringe screen. We're going to go with FICA here on this entry. Okay, so you'll add here. Now it's important to note that when you have fringe in overhead, you enter a different box for each fringe category for the one title. So right now we are in the fiscal associates fringe. If the fiscal associate was being charged for, let's say, health insurance for CDPHP, we're going to enter another box for overhead fringe, and we'll get another pre-populated box. And we're just going to show you an example here. If the vendor name is CDPHP, invoice number, etc., go down, and then you'd enter your SNAP, child nutrition, and add. So for each category that you're charging in this example for the fiscal associate fringe, you would have a box for each example. So if you're charging FICA, health, and disability, there would be a box for FICA, a box for health, and a box for disability. When you're done here entering for the month, you can press close, save. If you go into a category and you realize you shouldn't have entered that, again, go into current, and we're going to pretend, oh, I shouldn't have entered the CDPHP. Press the delete button, okay, and go down and press close, press save. Now you're going to go into rent, into current, and the template we're going to select, like we discussed, is overhead other. And this has the information that we're going to need for the overhead other category. The kinds of categories that would apply here, like I said, audit, rent, space, utilities, janitorial or maintenance, equipment rental, any consultants, any payroll finance charges from your main office, any insurance, or any others deemed appropriate that we've discussed with your budget. Press add here. Okay. You can press close here and press save. We have a question. For New York State unemployment, it is calculated each pay period but paid quarterly. Do we submit by pay period or when it is actually paid quarterly? So that depends, yes. So if you have New York State unemployment through payroll and you pay that bill quarterly, you can bill us quarterly for that. If you have a vendor that bills you biweekly or bills you monthly, some people have vendor unemployment, then you would bill us in that instance, which would be either the biweekly or the monthly. In this scenario, this person is saying they have the regular New York State employment, which is calculated by pay period but paid quarterly. So yes, here you would bill us quarterly. Okay, so now we can go to our voucher summary. Take a look and make sure that you've entered everything that you want to enter. If there's anything you might have forgotten, you could go into your budget items from the left by selecting any of these categories. If you need to enter anything else or fix anything. Make sure that any file attachments that we might need are uploaded. And once you're all set, you're going to want to submit your voucher to us. Once you submit your voucher, it comes to us for review and approval, and you'll see the status has now changed to processing. Processing means it's on our side. We're either going to approve it or we're going to send it back to you with red flags, kind of like with the budget process. The red flags will tell you anything we might need fixed in your wording or with some calculations or any questions we might have. And then once we're able to approve it, you'll get a notification of that. Now I think do we have another question? Okay, question is blank right now. Okay, so that was the information about how to submit a voucher through NOEP Online and all of the policies and procedures around vouchers in NOEP Online. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions for us at all, please feel free to email or call us. We're here to help you. We're going to, okay, hold on. This question must have popped up again. We already answered that one about the retroactive billing for outreach. Yes, okay, we answered that. So retroactive billing for outreach, yes, sometimes you might get an outreach invoice or approval a month or two later, but please don't let it go past 3 months. We can't be approving a whole bunch of outreach invoices in June for November. So please be on top of that with your NOEP coordinator or supervisor. Keep checking in and monitoring your budget with the outreach bank account and such. Your NOEP coordinator and supervisor will be able to work with you on that. In Part 2A of your fiscal manual, it talks about documentation. We do not ask for full documentation on each monthly voucher, but that is why we ask for the detailed information in the boxes. However, your fiscal representative or myself will ask you periodically for documentation on expenses. There are 2 ways that we review in depth some of the expenses that you submitted on your vouchers. There is an on-site review, and you will get one on-site review every cycle, every contract cycle, and it will usually cover about 2 years worth of your vouchers. And how that works is a random sample will be picked, maybe about 6 to 8 per year, and then you'll get this list well in advance of a bunch of things that I will need to see regarding those vouchers. Also, well in advance, we'll pick a date that agrees for both of us so that I can come and sit with you for this review. There can be follow-up work after that. So, you know, if you don't have everything right away, we can follow up, but it's best to have everything available. There's also remote and off-site documentation. Some of you have been through this. You'll get an email from me asking for 6 to 8 items with, you know, 2 or 3 parts to it. So I might ask for, you know, July of 2018's payroll expense for your NOEP coordinator. I might say, please give me a journal and a timesheet. So I will ask for random backup items throughout the years. And then the list is not exhaustive, but there is a list of commonly requested materials that serves as backup documentation. That's also in 2A, just to get you familiar with what you should have on file with your vouchers, or easily accessible in case we ask for it. So we're on to how to prepare a NOEP budget amendment via NOEP Online. And we'll talk about some of the policies around how to do that. So vouchers cannot be submitted to us with a category in the budget that exceeds the approved budget. So if you're finding that you're spending a lot in one budget category and you're significantly under in another, you'll have to do a budget amendment for that. We want everything to be, you know, adjusted accordingly and, you know, following each month, basically in line of what it should be. A new process starting with our 18-19 NOEP contract cycle is that you'll no longer need to submit a budget amendment by employee. And what this means is that we're going to be recognizing personnel lines by title, not by employee name. So for instance, if you have turnover with a NOEP coordinator, and you've had to fill that with first the person that left, and then maybe you've had a temp in the position, somebody was, you know, in your organization was sent to fill in for a little while, and then you refilled the position with somebody else. If you've had those 3 people in the position, but it hasn't exceeded the line, you can still use that one line. You don't have to keep doing budget amendments for that name of that particular employee. The only time that you would have to do the budget amendment is if the salary is more than what's there now. So if you were budgeting the line at, let's say, $30,000, and the new person coming in is going to be making $35,000, or you originally understated the salary for the position, then you would have to do a budget amendment. But of course, not by, you know, a different line. You would just change that one line. So that is a little bit easier for our subcontractors, that they don't have to keep doing several lines for each time there's turnover. The common reasons for a budget amendment: your agency has changes in personnel resulting in the need for higher salary amounts to be charged, or somebody is working more on NOEP than you expected. So the person could have the same salary, but instead of working 5% on NOEP, they've really been working more like 10 or 15% on NOEP. So that might need a budget amendment. You might want to take from maybe materials and supplies that you didn't purchase and put it in that person's salary. Fringe costs have increased from your original estimate. That's a common one. We have a lot of people who just can't estimate. You know, that's always a problem. What is health insurance going to increase to? Some people try to estimate that, and they estimate maybe at 3%, and it goes up 20%. So that is something that would need a budget amendment. Your agency has spent less or more than anticipated in travel, printing, and postage. You will spend close to your anticipated budget, but wish to shift from child nutrition SNAP to SNAP. Okay, there's always that switch that might go on in case you're under in child nutrition, over, etc. You're nearing the end of the contract year, and you wish to transfer from categories that are underspent to categories where funds could be spent better to further program goals. So if you haven't used that much outreach, you might want to do some outreach in the last few months of the contract and transfer some money there. That's an example. And your agency has covered expenses toward NOEP in kind, and due to some underspending, maybe you'd like to cover that now. So when is a budget amendment approval needed to come to us in NOEP Online? There are times that a budget amendment will not need to come to our staff for approval, and there are times that it will. So when a budget amendment is required to be reviewed and approved by us is any change in personnel, figures or narrative, any change in fringe, figures or narrative, any change in overhead, figures or narrative, and narrative only, changes in travel, communications, materials and supplies, printing, outreach, and postage. This is a big reason why in your budgets we tell you to be very vague on certain categories, because if you need to take from one line to another, it's basically just numbers. It is okay to do that because it won't have to come to us, which we're going to cover next. Information when a budget amendment will automatically be approved. So you can do budget amendments in NOEP Online and they'll have automatic approval. They won't even need to come to us. And that will be a figures only change or transfer between travel, communications, materials and supplies, printing, outreach, and postage. So in those categories, when we've done your budgets, we may have red flagged you and said, hey, keep this vague and don't put amounts on it. And that's the reason why. We're trying to keep it easier for you. If later in the year you think, okay, I'm not going to use this money in materials and supplies, I'd rather put it toward travel, it's easy for you in that scenario if you didn't put figures in to the narrative. We have a question about how many budget amendments are allowed within a fiscal year. We do not have a limit. That's a great question. There technically is no limit on that. I wouldn't go doing 15 of them. That might be very tedious, but there is no limit. Never copy and paste the same narrative, because that will definitely make it come to us. And just so you know, in NOEP Online, it does take your last narrative and paste it for you. So it already has that feature where if you are doing an amendment between two of the categories that I mentioned, it'll just take that information and pre-fill it already. So it'll already carry it over. We always tell you that even if you're not, even if the amendment has to come to us, if you're doing, let's say, between personnel and materials and supplies, change the personnel, but don't change the materials and supplies unless it's really needed. But anything that's not changing as far as narrative goes and you're doing an amendment, leave it alone. Don't copy and paste. It'll do it for you. One more thing is never check the box that says contract amendment. That is for office use only here. And we'll show you that box when we get into the screen, but please do not check it. That could lead to issues. Once your budget amendment is submitted to us, we'll either approve it or send it back with red flags, very similar to your voucher budget. And once it is approved, you can go on with your vouchering. while a budget amendment is in process, whether it's on your side or ours, you could not submit a monthly voucher. So please remember that if you need to do a budget amendment and it's going back and forth, your vouchers are held up. So please address it quickly. If we send it back with red flags, we address it quickly. So just keep that in mind. Always assess your year-to-date spending. And we have a report for that. It's called the Trend Report. It's very helpful. A lot of people use it. You can contact your fiscal representative and they'll show you how to use it. I don't know what that was. So anyway, the Trend Report will tell you exactly where you are with your spending. And if you don't know about the Trend Report, you can ask your fiscal representative about that. So, steps to prepare a budget amendment. You can log into NOEP online, and you can view your current budget by selecting View Current Budget 2018-2019. At the bottom of your home page, under your budget summary, you're going to see Budget Amendments. Click on New Budget Amendment to start. So at the top, you're going to see Amendment Number 1. As you go along, and if you do more budget amendments, they'll be numbered, Number 2, Number 3, etc. So here is going to be very similar to a regular budget, but this is where changes are going to be made. We're going to do an example for you where we're giving our NOEP coordinator a $2,000 bonus. So we're going to go into Personnel, and we're going to go into our NOEP coordinator, and we're going to show you how to give this NOEP coordinator a $2,000 bonus. So we're going to add $2,000 to their salary. So make sure your total matches, make sure your SNAP Child Nutrition matches. For this scenario, we're just, making it like that. Now, you can copy and paste. That is a feature here in NOEP Online, that you can copy and paste whatever information will apply to your proposed budget narrative and change it or add to it. So here, her information is the same here as far as the hourly rate, how they're paid, how many hours a week, but we're just adding here that she's receiving a $2,000 bonus. We're going to save it. Okay, whenever you make a change to your budget, the line will appear in pink to let you know that that line changed. We also get that. We also see what you changed by the pink highlighting. If you click on your budget summary, you're going to see that the changes plus minus column says $2,000. And your total cost underneath says $67,000 when this is a $65,000 budget. So this means that the $2,000 we added to personnel will have to be taken from somewhere. So now we're going to go into materials and supplies. And we're going to go into material. And as we mentioned before, we have a narrative here that is very vague. So we can just go in and change this to 1,500 from 3,500 and press save. We did not put anything in proposed because it's going to carry over. And as you can see, material highlighted to pink. Go back to your budget summary, and now you're going to see that changes plus minus is now 0, and your total cost is now back to $65,000. As a disclaimer, you would also change your FICA here, but we're not going to do it for purposes of being on this training. We're going to show you the box that you never check. It is this box here, is contract amendment. Please do not check that box. Okay, so under the budget summary, there is the file attachments again. Now, with something like this, where we have a bonus going to a NOEP coordinator or any employee, we would want backup for that. That's something we could discuss at a later time if you ever do make this type of budget amendment. It would be personnel papers, some kind of authorization from your ED, things like that. But here's where you would put that information. You would upload it like we showed you before in the Browse Upload feature. Once you have uploaded all of your file attachments and you see that everything is in balance here in your amendment, you're going to press Submit Budget. And you see Budget Work in Process Processing shows that you submitted amendment number 1. We will then get it and either approve it or give you the red flags like mentioned before. So that is the information on doing a budget amendment in NOEP Online and some of the policies around it. Of course, ask us any questions you need to through email or phone call. We're here to help. Part 4 of the fiscal manual is a little bit different. It is the acknowledgement page, and it talks about agency personnel. It's basically attesting by your fiscal director, who is named on your NOEP information sheet, that all budget voucher and budget amendment policies outlined in the manual will be strictly adhered to, that you will provide all backup documentation that we request. If you don't, like I said, you might be forced to be in probationary status on your contract, delayed payments, and reporting to OTDA. So you want to make sure that you have documentation for these expenses. I can't stress that enough. All regulations regarding retroactive vouchering and amendments will be strictly adhered to, as well as any in-kind expenses regarding NOEP coordinators. Any changes in fiscal personnel must be conveyed to your fiscal representative, and it must be done in writing. We've had instances where we did not know an employee left an agency that was a fiscal contact, and the agency was not getting very important emails and notifications from us. So we really need to be up to date on the contacts. We need to make sure that your contacts are getting all of the information from us and all of the alerts. We need to make sure that your contacts have NOEP Online access and that any old employees do not have NOEP Online access. We do not want to compromise any information, and we do not want any newer employees or other employees using other employees' NOEP Online IDs. So the fiscal director or executive director can email doing this written notice the fiscal representative or myself, letting them know the change for your voucher contact, budget contact, or fiscal director that deals with NOEP. From there, we will internally let who we need to let know so that they're issued a NOEP Online ID if they don't already have one, and that they're put in the contact list on our email distribution. We don't want your agency to miss any deadlines due to that. So that concludes the webinar on vouchering, budget amendments, and our policies and the acknowledgement page. Make sure you get those acknowledgement pages into me. I've been getting a lot of them, thank you, but let's keep them coming. If you need us at all, our emails are on the cover page of the fiscal manual. You can also call us. And also, this webinar is being recorded. So if you were late to the webinar, if you had to leave early, if you have another employee who you would like to see or hear the webinar, or just you want to go over it again in case you want to make sure you didn't miss anything, this webinar is being recorded, and you will get emails on how to access that recording. So, joining us today for this webinar. Thank you for the questions. They were great questions. And as I said, we're here to help you, so make sure you reach out to us, and I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.